Hello everybody and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be doing the January 2025 wrap up, our first wrap up of 2025, and I read 15 books. Like, who is she? Like, who is she that she read that many books? And I think I actually had a great reading month. Now, I did not have any like new 5 stars. I did do quite a bit of, I was gonna say quite a bit of rereading, but I only reread 2 books, but that's like a ton for me. I think I reread 0 books last year. So for me, 2 full books rereading is actually amazing. The only 5 stars that I have are rereads, and I think I have one star. I can't remember if I have 1 or 2. But I figured we would do something a little bit different. I feel like in 2024, I definitely did a lot of 1 to 5 star. I think I'm just gonna go in order of what I read this month, just because I don't have any 5 stars. I feel like it'll be more fun for it to be almost random. And you guys not know it's coming. So that would be crazy, right? That's like a crazy concept. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. But as usual, I'm gonna start with the DNFs. Now, most of these DNFs, if not all of these DNFs, were from reading my December book things and also from, I think, the Alcrite vlog. So you probably have seen most of these, if not all of them. And we're just gonna pretty much say them because, like I said, if you really want to know more about them, definitely go check out those 2 vlogs. First up, we have one from the Alcrite vlog, and that is To Kill a Shadow. This was like, yikes. This one was a very much yikes. I got really far into this one too. I think I got like 200 and something pages before I realized this was just not for me. This is like young adult romantasy. I think it's young adult at least. And it was just written incredibly poorly, and the ending got super weird. Like, I finished it by skimming the ending, and it was absolutely bizarre. Like, it was so bizarre. So definitely glad that I DNF'd this one, and I almost bought the second book at like 150 pages. I was like, oh my god, I'm really liking this. Almost bought the second book. So glad I didn't buy the second book. Next up, we have Heavenly Bodies. This was part of the read all of my December book box books. And this one's really sad because I love this cover, but this just proves to me that the Romantasy subscription from Fairy Loot is just not for me. And that no matter how pretty these books are, it doesn't mean that there's anything actually good in them, because to me this was like just so poorly written that I couldn't even get through. Like, I think I got through exactly 50 pages because I really wanted to try this one and I really wanted to like this one because of how gorgeous the cover is. But I pretty much hated everything about this one. Next up, we have arguably what is the saddest one in this entire video, and that is A Language of Dragons. I thought I was going to eat this shit up. I thought I was gonna absolutely love this book, and this turned out to just be it's bad. It was bad. And the best way to describe this and why I didn't like it is it made dragons super lame. Like, that is the best way to describe this. I didn't like the writing. I didn't like the characters. I don't like where the book goes. Like, again, I always skim the ends of books to be like, oh, actually, that's a really good ending. Maybe I should try reading it again. I hate the ending of this book, and I'm so glad I didn't waste my time actually reading the rest of this book, because again, I think I read like 150 pages and I despise this. Next up, we have At the End of the River Styx. Now, this is a different one. DNFs are made differently, and this is the definition of a DNF that I actually think a lot of people are really gonna like. The writing is really good. The pacing is rather slow, but this is an exploration of grief to the point that I could not handle it for my own mental health. Because of all the health and issues that I've got going on, it takes a lot for me to be able to read a book like this. And unfortunately, this wasn't it. This wasn't it. I could not handle this. I really just didn't want to read 350 pages, I think, of just absolute depression. I just couldn't do it. So I do think actually a lot of people are gonna like this book, but it definitely was not for me. And then the last DNF that I had this month is actually from the thriller vlog, and it's really funny because I literally forgot at the end of the video that I had read this for the thriller vlog. So I only show the other books in the video and I ignore this one, but it has crossed my heart. This just isn't for me. So I just don't like when emails are kind of like, everything is like they're telling you everything in these emails, and I just found them incredibly boring. And the other 2 books that I read that have emails as one of the primary sources of communication, what is it? The Coworker by Frida McFadden, which I gave a 1 star. I did not like. And then The Appeal, which I think gave like a 2 star, and I was super bored. Same thing goes here. I was super bored, even with the twist, which I actually thought was a pretty good twist, but I just didn't care. So this is not the type of thriller for me. I think I'm gonna be careful about picking up things that say mixed media from now on. I like podcast mixed media, but I don't think I like email mixed media. So the very first book that I read of 2025 was The Buried and the Bound, and I read this for the Alcrite vlog, which I am so happy about because the rest of that vlog was a bit of a bummer. So this was 4 stars, and this is following our main character, who is this hedge witch, and she befriends two other guys about her age, and every single person in the story has their own thing that's going on. And it's really interesting. It did take me quite a bit to get into this book because there are three different points of view, but they really work super well together by the end. And I think this is such a good book for a setup for a second book. So I already have the second book and I'm so excited to read it. I think it's going to be even better than this one, but this was a great introduction to the story as a whole. Next up, I ended up reading actually my favorite book of the month besides the rereads, and that is Love and Other Conspiracies. This was literally everything that I wanted in a romance. We have a conspiracy theorist meets like a production type of person, and they end up hosting this little TV show, kind of almost like a podcast, where they're talking about conspiracies and cryptids, and oh my gosh, I loved it. I loved it so much. My husband and I actually are huge fans of like cryptid stuff and watching alien shows, and our favorite shows to watch was like Bigfoot Hunt, Expedition Bigfoot or something like that. We don't really believe in any of it, but we love watching it and listening to podcasts about it. So this was my dream of a romance book, and it was so cute and so much fun. I would highly recommend this one to anybody who wants a really fun, quick pace romance. It was a great time. I actually would reread this, and I cannot wait for the second book to come out, even though it is following new characters. I was kind of hoping it would follow the same characters, like hunting something else, but I definitely will pick up the next one in this little series. The next one that I read for the Outcrate vlog specifically is I think I'm gonna call it Revel. We went through this in the Outcrate vlog. I don't know if it was Revel or Revel, but we're gonna say Revel. And I actually did try and DNF it like twice, and I wouldn't have been upset if I DNF'd it. I'm glad I finished it, but it didn't really leave me with any lasting like ideas on it, so I think I could have DNF'd it and been totally fine. Like I wouldn't have thought a second thing about it, but I am glad I did end up finishing it. So this is a very close retelling to Moulin Rouge, which makes it really, really fun. I just think it was way too long for what it was, and that was like a lot of my issues with the book, is how long it was and a lot of pacing problems. I do like what it did differently compared to Moulin Rouge, but if you've seen Moulin Rouge, you've basically read this book, especially the first half. It does deviate towards the end, like what's going on in the end, but it's basically Moulin Rouge with some fantasy aspects to it. Next up, I read Beautiful Ugly, which will have its own dedicated vlog for it. I don't know if that's coming out first or this is coming out first, but I did give it a 1 star. It is, I believe, my worst book that I read this month. I really just hated it. I really, really hated it. Because I think the author broke a thriller / mystery rule where the actual author lied to you, and it's not just an unreliable narrator situation. I literally don't think you could solve this. The book is goofy. If you want something just absolutely bizarre, I would recommend this one. It is following our main character, who is a writer, and his wife goes missing at the beginning of the book, and it kind of takes place months or a year afterwards, and he ends up going to this secluded island, which I do love the setting, and to write his next book, and everything kind of just escalates from there. So it's an interesting premise, but I really hated how it was done. A massive disappointment of this month, and probably my most disappointing book of the month, is The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love. I did not like this. Like, I should love this, and I actually thought it was a 5 star for probably the first 50% of the book, but this was too long. This was too long for the humor that was in here. A lot of the storyline was backtracking a lot and just repeating the same thing over and over again. The humor got exhausting by halfway through the book. It wasn't funny anymore. It was over the top and obnoxious, and this just needed to be a novella, and I would have adored this book. Unfortunately, the longer this book went on, the worse it got, and I did end up giving it a 2 star, and that's being a bit generous. That is how much I really hated the book by the ending. It just like didn't really have a point by the end, but we're following these ornithologists, and they're kind of having this competition to capture this bird, and the point of it, I mean, it is a romance. Like, the point is that they're falling in love. It's like an enemies to lovers kind of thing, or rivals to lovers, I would say more. And it was so cute at the beginning, and it was just bizarre. Some of the asides were just super weird. So this could have been great, but it ended up just not working for me. The next one that I read is Holiday Romance, which is a huge surprise hit for me. This was, I think, like my second favorite book that I read this month, besides my rereads. And I ended up giving it a 4.25. It's adorable. It is so cute. It's on Kindle Unlimited. And it's like, oh my gosh, I never would have read this, but Sid Bookworm on her Patreon for her book club read this for January. And I ended up joining her on her book club thing. and we had such a great discussion, and I love the book. It was just such a surprise. My expectations were so low because like with a book named Holiday Romance, you don't really expect that much. It was great. The writing was great. The romance was great. I loved everything about it. It is kind of like a friends to lovers situation, strangers to friends to lovers, I guess, but it is taking place over a Christmas season, and our two main characters are trying to get home for Christmas, but there's like flight delays and all this stuff, so they have to travel to all these different airports, and it's just an absolute mess of things that are happening. And the side story is the story actually being told from the past because they've known each other for 10 years and they always meet at the airport to fly back home together for Christmas because they're both from Ireland. And so we get a glimpse of all of the 10 years in the flashbacks, and it's so cute to see their story like build from there, and I loved it. It was such a good time. I would highly recommend this. Again, I feel like I just need to read romance. I'm having a great time with romance. Well, I guess I just had The Ornithologist and I didn't like that one, but it's like a historical weird romance. Just like generic romance, I'm having a great time with. And then another shocking development was The Boyfriend. I read this for the thriller vlog and I gave it a 4.5. Frida McFadden, you did it again. I either love a Frida McFadden or despise it. Like there really rarely is an in-between. I think Never Lie was the only in-between that I gave like a 3.5. But like the Housemaid series, I gave a 4-star, a 5-star, and then I think a 4-star. And then like The Coworker, I gave a 1-star. Never Lie was a 3-star. There's another one that I read that was a 2-star, but I don't remember which one it was. The Inmate was a 2-star. And now The Boyfriend is a 4.5. I loved it. But actually, it kind of is like my second favorite books. Holiday Romance goes down 1. So it's 11 Other Conspiracies, The Boyfriend, and then Holiday Romance. The Boyfriend was just, it was everything that I wanted at the end. And it went as crazy as I was hoping it would go. And it totally fooled me. Like I did not see what was coming, kind of. There was like a little thing that I saw was coming. My mom figured out most of it, which I was really impressed with. And we actually buddy read it together. And I think that does heighten the experience of reading because reading with my mom is really fun. Shocked that I like this as much as I did, but it is following our main character and she's kind of in the dating scene currently. And there's some murders of young women around her age that are occurring. And in the past, we're following a high school kid who is like obsessed with thinking about killing his girlfriend, and you don't know like what is the mix between the past and the present and who is who. Loved it. I thought it was so good. I actually would recommend that one. I know that's like crazy, but I enjoy some of Frida McFadden books, okay? Then we reread Fourth Wing and 5-star, actually 6 out of 5. This is my favorite book that I read this month. 6 out of 5 stars. I adore this book. I don't think this is romantasy. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me, but I don't think this is romantasy. This to me is fantasy. Like it's not high fantasy or anything. It is just fantasy. And this is fantasy to me with a really good romance subplot, because to me, fantasy is if you can take the romance out and it still totally makes sense. You could make the romantic interest just some random person that she's friends with and it would still work. They could even make the random person like her sister or something and it would still work. Like I've thought this through. So to me, this is a fantasy with a really good romance. I don't have to tell you what this is about. 6 out of 5 stars. Love rereading this. I would reread it again, and I probably will. And also, I love this paperback. I love it. It's so floppy. It's so floppy. I'm obsessed with it. I cannot wait for Iron Flame to get its own floppy paperback. Then I had another surprise, again, a romance. We had Dungeons and Drama. I do have the second book that I'm really excited to read. 4-star, so much fun. This is like the cutest little young adult romance. I was a little bit annoyed at the beginning by our main character because we were following our main character who is a drama nerd. She doesn't particularly love like being in them, like she likes it, but she just likes the stage in general. Like she really wants to actually like direct and write something and be that type of person, and she has a great time doing that. But she gets in some trouble and she ends up having to work at her dad's D&D store, which that's my vibe. That is my vibe. I used to go to a D&D store like at least 2 times a week to play with some friends. Back when we lived in Winston-Salem, it was so much fun and we met like the coolest people and we would play board games for hours and we'd play Dungeons and Dragons. And I also had a D&D group in college that we would go there once a week and we would spend 10 hours playing Dungeons and Dragons until like 3 or 4 in the morning, and then we'd go home and then do it again next week. And it was like the greatest time. I'm obsessed with it. So I was a little bit annoyed at the beginning because she is so judgmental of the nerds who play Dungeons and Dragons, and generally they're some of the nicest people you're ever gonna meet. Some of them are terrible. I've had my fair share of just like, most of the time they're not even that bad. They're just so obsessive about the game that they get pissed off at you if you don't follow their rules specifically and really exact. There's assholes in any group of people, but generally who we've met have been amazing and very welcoming. And so I was getting really annoyed at the beginning. I also didn't love that the only other girl in the Dungeons and Dragons group was a bitch. Like she was awful. And that's, again, not my experience. Like everyone's experience is different, and I have met some nasty people. Again, there's one in every group, but I wish that she had found like a friend who was already a nerd and played Dungeons and Dragons, and there was just another girl who was really nice and accepting. That was like my biggest flaw with this. Otherwise, it was really, really cute, and I loved the romance. It was adorable. Then we moved on to our book club pick for January, and that was The Last Hour Between Worlds. I keep saying this title wrong. This was unfortunately a 2-star. I'm glad because it did seem that a lot of people actually did enjoy this in the book club, which was really cool. So some people got a 5-star book out of this, which was fantastic. Unfortunately for me, I don't like time loop. And I should have known that going into this, but I just didn't like think about it. I thought this sounded really good. And this was the November Illumicrate, which should have hinted at that it was not going to vibe for me, because Illumicrate and I struggle. We have a complicated relationship, and the complicated relationship is that I'm ready to cancel my subscription with Illumicrate, but I haven't yet. I'm skipping until they don't let me anymore, or I want books. We'll see. We'll see. Very complicated relationship. But this just didn't work for me. Like, there was a lot of issues that I had with this book. It was too long. I would have loved it if it was a novella. That's what I really wanted. And then this turned out to have a lot to do with motherhood, like way more than I thought, and that is just not something I enjoy reading about. But in this one, we were following our main character, who is a hound, and hounds go through these layers of the world. So in this, there's a thing called echoes, and basically you have Prime, which is our world, and then there's Echo 1 through Echo 11, and they are just like alterations on Prime. And like layer 1 is like, it looks pretty normal. Layer 2 starts getting a little weirder. 3, you're getting real weird. 4, unrecognizable things are happening. So the echoes are so cool. I love that. But everything else about the story, because of the time loop, I didn't love. I wish we had explored the echo related things more, because we're following basically our main character stuck in this time loop at a ball where people are dying, and she's trying to figure out what's happening. And again, sounds great. Would have been great as a novella, but it was just a 2-star. It just didn't work for me. Then moving on to my read of the Red Rising series, I finished Golden Sun. This is a 4-star. I did not love this as much as Red Rising. I had a major problem with the massive time jumps, but there was some stuff that happened in this book. Amazing. Like, I got some chills. We got introduced to a new character, Ragnar. The chills that I had. And the ending of this one was just like mouth on the floor. Crazy. Absolutely crazy, the ending of this book. So there was a ton of stuff that I liked. I do think I did get a bit lost in this one, because there was like even more characters than the first one. So I did somewhat struggle to keep up what was going on. But again, I listened to the dramatized adaptation, which I know some people are gonna be like, blasphemous. But I like them. I think they're really entertaining. So I am moving on to, is Morningstar, I think, the next one? And I have the next 2 books, 4 and 5, actually coming in the mail. I got them for the Barnes & Noble get $10 if you spend $50 or over on hardbacks. So I'm excited, because I do want the next books in hardback, because these are, I don't know, I just like hardbacks, especially when I want to keep them. They just last longer. Like, all my old paperbacks are falling apart. So I do, like, on books that I want to keep around for a long time, I do really prefer hardbacks. So these will probably eventually get replaced with hardbacks, just because these I got all of these used for like $5, the first 3 books, because I wasn't sure how I felt about them. So these will get, like, you can see they've been abused and loved by the previous owner. So I'll keep these as long as they stay together, but I will eventually get these in hardback. But yeah, again, had a fun time with this. Didn't love the jumping around, but again, it's a Red Rising book, and it's very entertaining, and I did sob. There was a section of this I absolutely sobbed. So I am pretty excited to start Morningstar. Next up, we reread Iron Flame. Yes, it is still a 5-star. I will say I did have a couple of more problems in this book upon a reread, but it's more just based on the fact that it was a reread. This is still a 5-star upon reread, upon first read, etc. But this is just not, like, some books are better to reread than others. And this is definitely one that I needed to reread it for Onyx Storm, but it's so dense with the politics, and there's a lot of stuff that I really just didn't need to remember because I kept it in my head. So there's I really needed just the major plot points in this. And a lot of this is just a ton of politics and plot and going back and forth. And so I loved it, but it definitely was not as much fun upon a reread. So I probably would not reread this one again. I think I'm good. I think I'm good. I still loved my experience reading this, but definitely not as much as Fourth Wing. One of my other least favorite books of this month, and this was for my thriller vlog, and that is A Killing Cold. 2 stars. I really didn't like this. I didn't think it was anything special. I'm thinking Kate Alice Marshall just isn't for me personally. I can see a lot of people enjoying this. If you love rich family drama and isolated settings, I feel like you could really like this. And I should have liked this, but I really didn't like the end, and I didn't like how this played out. And the end to me was super anticlimactic, but we are following our main character who is in a relationship with this really wealthy guy, and she ends up being invited to, is it Christmas? I think it's Christmas, right? She ends up getting invited up to their mansion or whatever, their house, I don't know, but it's on this huge property, and she's going to meet the family for the first time, and she's engaged to this guy, and it hasn't been that long since they were dating. And the big thing is she doesn't have memories of her past to a point, and she figures out that something relating to this family relates to her past that she can't remember. So it has such a great plot, and I did like some aspects of this, but overall the way that it was brought together and the ending I did not enjoy. So unfortunately it is a 2-star. Then we have the book that I thought would be my favorite, and that I was panicking over getting a copy of this stupid Target edition. Onyx Storm, 4-star. I still really liked it, but it definitely let me down in quite a few aspects. Again, don't get me wrong, loved the book. I loved the book. I feel like I have to keep repeating this when I talk about this book because my expectations are literally so high that anything that doesn't meet this expectation is gonna feel bad. So even though I adored this book, I did. I love being back in this world. I love being back with these characters. There were a couple of moments that I did not like. I did not like the direction that the book took. I think the next book is going to be great based on what happened in this, but I personally was just too stressed out while reading this book to really enjoy it. That's kind of what it comes down to, is I didn't like the end of this book, and I didn't like how tense I was while I was reading this, expecting certain things to happen, and it just stressed me out. It absolutely stressed me out. I actually think this is one of those books that once the series is complete, this could actually be a 5-star depending on where the rest of the series goes, because that ending needs to be explained. The ending needs to be explained in a way that makes sense in my brain why Rebecca thought that was a good idea. And once it is, I might love this book. I might love this book. So I still am in the camp of thinking this should have been 3 books, 3 800-page books. I think Fourth Wing could have been by itself, 500 and something pages. And then I think Iron Flame and Onyx Storm could have been condensed down into a book. And then that leaves us with a 3rd book. I just think that there was a lot of extra stuff in Iron Flame and in this book that didn't really need to happen. And it feels like we're trying to buff up a series into a 5-book series that could have just been a 3-book series. So that, along with the ending and how tense I felt throughout the whole book, leaves me at a 4-star. Still loved it, but it was just a 4-star compared to a 6 out of 5 and a 5 out of 5. So we're sliding down a bit, which makes me a little bit nervous. Oh, and my point about Fourth Wing. So Iron Flame, I feel the same about as Fourth Wing, where Iron Flame to me is a fantasy where you could take the romance out and it's still 90% of the plot still exists. This is a romantasy. We went almost too hard into the romance. Literally, the whole book is relying on the romance in this one. And I think that's also a reason that I struggled with it a bit more. I wanted a bit more fantasy heavy related things that weren't directly relying on the romance to do things. So I'm trying to be as vague as possible. It's really hard talking about the 3rd book in a series and be vague. But anyway, 4 stars, still very much liked it. Just wish a couple things had been tweaked. And then the final book that I read that I am So surprised because I wasn't expecting this. I even got this is a book I actually got from the publisher, which is crazy, and I'm so glad that I have it. It is Needy Little Things. This really wasn't on my radar. Like, I knew it was coming out and I had an e-arc of it, but in my brain I was like, okay, it's just like a young adult contemporary mystery kind of thing. No, this is so good. This is a 4-star because I did have a couple of problems with the friendship. The friendship was driving me a little bit crazy in this book. And there were a couple of things that writing issues were at the very beginning. I kind of like had a hard time connecting where we were going with a couple of things. But other than that, I'm going to say that's probably a debut writing kind of thing. But other than that, this is probably one of the best debuts I've ever read. This is fantastic. I would not go into this though, because like it's marketed as a young adult speculative mystery. And personally, I think this is a young adult speculative contemporary book because we're kind of dealing with the ramifications of this issue of missing Black teenagers are just not getting the type of exposure that they need to get in the media compared to other missing people. And I've always thought that teenagers in general, I hate the fact that it's immediately, oh, they're probably just runaways. Like, that's like every teenager, and that is awful. And it's especially bad within the Black community where they're not taken seriously and they automatically say, oh, they're probably just a runaway. So it is definitely focusing primarily around that. And yes, there is a mystery, but compared to everything else we talk about in the book, the mystery is not like the main focal point, or at least it's not what I got out of it, because what I got out of it was really talking about the original missing girl in this book. So our main character, she has a group of friends, and her best friend Malcolm, his twin sister went missing and was never found, and it is devastating. It is actually devastating. So her story kind of underlies the entire book, and that's really what my brain locked onto. And you're not really trying to solve her mystery. You're just trying to understand what went wrong and what could have been done differently. And the last line in this book made me sob like a baby, like an absolute baby. I love this book. I would highly recommend anybody read this. I think it is so good. And yeah, I just wasn't expecting anything from this book, and I love that. It's like Dungeons and Drama. Totally different vibes, but I wasn't expecting anything from that and I loved it. Wasn't expecting anything from this and I loved it. So I definitely would highly recommend this one, and I think this one comes out on the 4th of February. So yeah, that is everything that I read this month. I think I had actually a really good month. Like, yeah, I didn't have any new 5-stars, but I had some that were really close, and I read through a ton of books, some like backlist books, but a bunch of new books, which was really fun. And I'm just like feeling hyped about reading. Like, I'm really excited that I'm so excited about reading. And I have a lot of really exciting books that I want to get to in February. So I'm kind of just chilling. Today is January 31st. I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break from reading today, and I think tomorrow we'll get back into reading. And there's like a bunch of readathons in February. There's Valentine's Day stuff in February. So I think it's gonna be a good month. I think it's gonna be a good reading month. Hopefully as good as this one is. Hopefully we find a 5-star. Onyx Storm was supposed to be the 5-star. And it was not. It wasn't even my favorite book this month of new reads. So that is crazy. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Definitely let me know down in the comments down below what you guys read. If you've read any of these, if you want to read any of these, any book recommendations based on stuff that I liked in this video. Definitely like the video if you enjoyed it, and definitely subscribe so you don't miss any future content. We've got a lot of stuff coming out in February. I pretty much have the whole month already planned out. It's crazy. We got so much stuff that we're doing. If you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.